want to live and work by. And we have the perfect guest to do this. Today, we've got Michael Lebowitz on. Michael is the CEO and founder of an incredible agency called Big Spaceship. Big Spaceship was founded in 2000. I've probably been admiring them since about 2005 or 2006. Michael and I had the chance to become friends many years ago in something called the Society of Digital Agencies when we got together, even before that became what became Soda. Michael's is just an incredible talent, but he's also very thoughtful about his own success. So, how do you even measure success? You could argue that Big Spaceship and Michael are very successful because of their tenure. They've been around, what, 22 years or something. You could argue that Big Spaceship and Michael are a huge success due to the number of awards that they've been recognized for. They've literally won probably every advertising award you can do at the highest level, internationally, and with some of the biggest brands in the world. You could argue that Michael and Big Spaceship have been a big success because they've always maintained their independence of one of the last kind of indie shops. But today, Michael and I are going to talk about how he measures success, not just with himself, but also with his clients and how he applies that in his own life. So I think today is going to be a very educational and inspirational chat, and I welcome you to another week of O Ship. Michael, welcome to O Ship. Glad you're here.
Thank you, sir. Nice to see you, Freddie.
Yeah, you too, man. Again, I wish it was in person. Maybe hopefully soon. It seems like the world is returning to some form of sanity soon.
I have been enjoying all of these formally mundane things like they are the highlight of my life. It's like Christmas and New Year's Eve and my birthday all at once just because I went to a restaurant.
Yeah, it's the little things. I had a really good friend from England moved to South Florida where I live, and he moved here nine months ago. This is a guy who lived in the village that I lived in England, so like really old school friend. And I
Mm-hmm.
basically haven't had a chance to see him. And
Right.
he's been 30 minutes away. And I found out the funniest thing, he lives 30 minutes away, but if you go out the main street of my development and drive straight north, I go straight into where he lives, and it's almost like we're down the road from the village from each other again, but now
That's
we're on the other
crazy.
side of the Atlantic. How weird is that?
It's really bizarre. Except you are in Florida, so it's also the opposite
Exactly.
of an English
Perfect.
village in every
Yeah,
way.
exactly right. So anyway, I'm going to get to see him this weekend. I think I have been more excited about seeing a friend in a while. So the
That's
return to
fantastic.
normalcy. Anyway, I know you. I've obviously talked a little bit about your background. Hopefully, I didn't embarrass you too much by kind of showering my praise for you. But I'd love for you to give a quick introduction for anyone in the audience who may not know about you and your company and your background. And I know you're a very humble guy, but I encourage you to. It's okay to say, if you can, say client names and things like that. I just know
Sure.
other people will really help to understand what you've accomplished.
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for the incredibly glowing setup. Um, it's an interesting question that I guess we're going to discuss, which is, I hadn't really thought about it from our prior conversation in terms of measuring success, but I think it's a good frame to put on it. So yeah, as you said, I've been running this crazy, strange animal of an agency for the past 21 years and change. Um, we've obviously been a lot of different types of agencies along, although I think the through line is humanity. It's about people on the inside, and what we produce is always about people. So that's where we are now, I think, is a very different business, but with all of the same kind of underpinnings that we've always had, and it's rooted in humanity. And I would say, if anything, we've assembled our offering at this point to kind of rehumanize business, that there's been such a focus on efficiency metrics. We're talking about what to measure, often to the exclusion of common sense and humanity. And we help our clients in many ways, sometimes in a much more traditional advertising or digital arena, and other times much more consultatively, but really to be more human in the world. And we work with all sorts of amazing clients. We work with Starbucks is probably our biggest and certainly a very long-lasting relationship. We work with Chase, JP Morgan Chase Company, Google, Sony. We have a wonderful company based out of Israel called Lightrix, and many more. I don't want
Great, man.
to.
I guess
Yeah, we work with incredible groups. And we get an incredible diversity of challenge. Ultimately, I think it's about how do we apply lots of really brilliant thinkers to all different types of complex challenges. Just kind of let them go.
It's talk to me more about this concept of humanity in the business. I think you could argue that, and I've talked about this on our ship before, where the people who were lucky enough to go through some of the like creative phases that the internet went through, let's say even when you and I first got a chance to meet, versus now where you kind of alluded to earlier, things are getting kind of much more data driven, and maybe how people look at these experience feels less human. I'd love to get your kind of take on that and how you keep humanity in the work that you guys produce.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of kind of inherent humanity in the earlier stages of the web, because it was literally just a very small group, relatively, of people creating anything for it. And the tools were sort of brilliant and expressive. There were no rules of any kind, not a lot of best practices, as you well remember. And there was, interestingly, since we're sort of talking about measurement, there was also very little accountability because it was so new. People didn't really know how to measure it when it was starting out. And so we would measure the work we did. I'm sure you did the same, by just, do people like it? What are the reactions? What are people talking about when they're writing about this, or if they get in touch with us? And those felt like very human things, real people talking about what's happening. I think more recently, it's not surprising. There's an arc to new things. Early on, you get a lot of experimentation, but not a lot of standardization. And that's necessary to kind of define the syntax, the language of how you create in this medium. And then as people start producing things that can make more and more money, and it becomes more and more a part of the economy overall, then you need scale of a different kind, you need measurement of a different kind, or need is maybe in quotes here. It gets imposed, best practices get imposed, and that's necessary and important. But often what gets lost is that sense of total freedom of expression. And I think that's driven a lot of how we've adapted as an organization, because we want to keep it interesting. Of course, we want to keep growing to an extent, and we need to keep making money. But really, I think it's about continuing to get to work together on interesting things that we find challenging, and that's become kind of such a part of who we are, that we kind of grow the business against that as a goal. We like to work with really good people inside and out, and our values are structured around that, and paying proper respect to that, and just can we make things better in some way? It's about progress over perfection, in a sense.
Got a nice little heart from our buddies over at the FWA. It looks like we've got quite a few people tuning in live right now, which is
Oh,
nice.
cool.
So, um, on
That's
a
Rob.
yeah, yeah,
Love you,
big
Rob.
shout out to Rob. I think there's this view. What I'm hearing is like there was a certain sense of like intuition or like gut feeling that we were doing things back in the day on. Um, you see this big push from clients where things are so whether either the outcome is so that it's a data driven performance driven outcome they're looking for, or they're using data to try and power all the how the experience is supposed to be designed. um would you argue that maybe part of what's kept the magic at Big Spaceship is that you guys said, yeah, we'll appreciate data, but we're still, if you get really brilliant talented people, intuition can still really be king, and that's how new barriers can be broken, I would argue.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think also I think there's a false dichotomy that's been set up by, usually it's the sort of pundits and press more than any particular uh, interested party, but it's sort of creativity versus data. And I think that that's ludicrous, right? Anything uh, can be a contributor to excellence. Information is information. Inspiration is inspiration. They can be combined. So, one of the things that we've done from very early on is we sort of codify this in a linguistic way. We say disciplines, not departments, and we've done that. It's the only thing I really stamp my feet about at the company. Departments to me sounds like a group of people who do one thing, who sit separately on their own and don't connect to anyone else. You kind of pass the paper through the slot to the next department in line. Whereas discipline is just a suggestion of kind of your skill set, your area of mastery. And so we say disciplines because everything is ultimately about sort of knocking down those false barriers, which are really just mental models, right? And saying we all work together. There's a reason we're all here, and we're all here to provide our insight, our opinion, our energy, our passion, perspective, of course, and then you apply that through your discipline. And so, one thing that we've done is internally we have both analysts and strategists. Internally, we have a single group called Stratalytics, which is the combination of qual and quant working together.
I love that. When I'm also, again, my context with you, and I sometimes think of you very much like on the deep creative side. It sounds like a lot of where you guys have been shifting is more around like almost like digital transformation, and trying to apply this to businesses. I'd love to kind of understand what your take is on that, and maybe how you guys applying that into new clients.
Yeah. Well, sort of yes and no, I guess is the answer. We are certainly in the transformation business, and I think anyone who's providing kind of creative services of any kind that aren't purely sort of artifact oriented, here is a thing in a rectangle that you can post in a place where that rectangle fits, should be in the transformation business. I mean, we're in an inflection point, particularly over the last year, of a massive amount of accelerated change and kind of the more even distribution of that change. So that's the yes part. We're very much involved in helping progress happen for our clients. The part that's the no part is calling it digital. I think digital transformation has been something that's been adopted by the enterprise as a term and as a way of looking at the type of change that needs to happen, but it's false. I think it benefits certain providers of digital transformation services, but I read that a couple of years ago, even it wasn't even this isn't current. I think it's 2 years ago. It's estimated that $900 billion was wasted on failed digital transformation projects and efforts. So you have to ask yourself why that is. And I think if that's a massive boatload of money.
Yeah.
So that requires a pretty fundamental question. It's not like it's going to be solved by slight process change, because that's an epic number of projects, a huge amount of human effort. And I think it's got to be that the fundamental thing is that digital is the condition, the context of change, but change happens in organizations by human transformation, by organizing people differently, incentivizing people differently. What you value and what you measure as an organization is going to be how your people flow through it. And if you look at sort of the history of scientific management and kind of where all of our management structures derive from, they come from making people more like machines. You know, Friedrich Taylor, who the creator of scientific management, it's basically like, how do we get humans to keep up with these fancy new steam-powered machines we have? And it was about efficiency as the single metric to rule them all. And I think that is very much in conflict with the nature of the economy that we're in. We're not in an industrial economy that's about replication at speed and elimination of defect. It's about newness. It's about innovation. You know, there's the word that goes around all the time. If you really want innovation, but you're completely organized towards efficiency, then you have something that's working at cross purposes, because innovation happens from lots of interesting catalytic connections bumping up against each other. It's about the unexpected, and efficiency is about how do we make things as expected as possible. And so I think, I think software to solve the problem is the wrong approach. I think it's what are we doing that puts us where we are versus where we want to be, and then how do we reorient from there with what we already have. And then you can accelerate, you can find efficiency, you can empower with tools. But just handing people new tools and saying we're better now, it's, if you hand a carpenter a keyboard, that's digital transformation, but the carpenter is a craftsperson with a hammer, among many other things, right?
Yeah. I instantly had a visual of someone trying to hammer something in with a keyboard, it not being very pretty, by the way. I don't know why that popped into my head.
I've seen some keyboards destroyed.
Smash keyboards, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your Office Space moment. I really like this idea around human transformation. When you think about digital transformation, and I think it's, to your point, it can be a really, really overused term. It has a massive umbrella. It's been hijacked and used inappropriately in a countless number of instances. And when you really think about where things are going, maybe digital transformation was something that needed to exist 10 or 15 years ago in sense of getting adoptions of technologies. But now I would argue that, and I think along with you, maybe just phrase this a slightly different way, that the adoption of technology into businesses, if applied in the right way, actually humanize the business more, because if it's done in the right way, it actually frees us up as humans. Instead of replicating these, to be like machines, as you kind of described earlier, it creates this opportunity for us to be more human, because the AI and automated processes can take on the mechanical repetition, whatever you want to call it, using an industrial kind of term, and let us focus on the other side of the equation. And I think there's something quite beautiful about that if we start to figure out how to adopt it properly.
I have to say, sorry to jump in, but I have to say, I think that you also need leadership at companies to recognize that everything isn't just about cost savings.
Yeah.
That if you can replace a whole lot of human activity with whatever it is, machine learning, robotic process automation, all of that stuff. That's great. But if you think beyond the narrowness of efficiency of expenditure, you say, now I have all of this additional human intellect, human power. What can I deploy it towards? Instead of, I no longer need all of these people.
Yeah.
And I think it's that transactional sort of, well, this leads to this, and not really being able to think a few steps ahead, or being able to, because we all know that the only thing you can do in 3 months to show a difference quarter to quarter for public companies, there's not a lot of creative acts that you can land in 3 months, but there are a lot of destructive ones.
So I want to go from here and kind of change gears. So I want to ask you, when you look at client work and the types of challenges that you guys may be dealing with on a business level every day, I'd love to understand how you measure success there. And I'll forewarn you in advance, the follow-on question of that is, I want to start talking how you apply measuring success to your own life, because I think you have made some really interesting and frankly very cool decisions about your own career over the years that I think other people would really benefit from learning about. But let's start with how you apply measurement to, let's say, a client challenge that comes in.
Well, there are a number of kind of measurement types. I always encourage my team to think in terms of, we have goals we want to accomplish for the client. We also should have our internal goals, knowing what that is, and all of the drivers and limitations that every project has. What do we want to get out of this as well? And so there are different types of measurement, and that's not to the exclusion of the client goals. It's in fact, I think, out of respect for the client's goals. If we're two different organizations, if we try to adopt what they value from the work, we will be less passionate, nor would they value necessarily the exact same things. But if we sort of look through a lens where their goals can coexist with ours, we know that we're going to be able to bring the right kind of energy and enthusiasm to it. And a lot of our internal goals are things like education. We want to learn something. We want to build on something that we had learned on a similar prior project. And I think, with our clients, we have pretty rich discussions about what they want to measure and why. The problem with a lot of the sort of, I think every company has their own kind of culture of measurement. And I like to start with, rather than here's what we're able to measure, so let's cobble that together. It's like, well, what's really meaningful? So like one of the very first conversations we have is, it's a couple of years down the line and this has gone incredibly well. Like, what happened? Because that's a human question.
Yeah, what I love about your response, I think this is just so telling and such a great setup for kind of think where this second half of this conversation is going to go, is that where I may have answered that in a very like, well, it's about achieving their business objectives, or some kind of very 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 client centric. I love that you never ever lose sight of your own team's goals, and that's always woven into whatever your thoughtful answer or thoughtful end place you're trying to get to. You always kind of measure your own teams, your own personal alignment with that. And I think that's very reflective of how you've approached your life, bluntly.
I think you're probably right. It's
yeah. I just forget. I wasn't expecting that when you said it, and I was like, that nails it. That nails you for me when I think about you.
I do think there's something about there's something about sort of interrogation that I think people tend to have a negative reaction to it, and particularly when there's the sort of client agency dynamic. And I think it's a lot of respect for, like, I want to learn your business, and I want to also, I'm an outside perspective, and or we're an outside perspective, and sometimes that's really valuable to get you to see something that you're taking for granted. I need that.
Yeah.
I talk to a whole wealth of people outside the company all the time to get perspective on what I'm doing. And so to say, well, why do you want to measure that, is not, is not a disrespectful act. It's an act of incredible respect. And I think just because we're supposed to sort of take a particular type of role as an agency partner, I think we should. I don't know. I prefer to build long-term relationships, and so we build trust, and trust allows you to ask deeper and more sort of penetrating questions, and that's where you get to real interesting and change that also has traction.
So I want to go a quick shout out. I also have got two questions have popped up already
Great.
in chat. I want to say, if you've got questions, we're gonna answer both these questions. We love engaging with our audience. So to Kate and Masayoshi, glad you're watching. So we're gonna address these. I don't want to make Michael lose his train of thought on one trend we're going to go down, but we're definitely going to go back to your questions. And if you're watching right now and you've got more questions, please pop them in chat, and we'll do our best to address them. So one of the things I assume you okay talking about this kind of stuff, but one of the things that I know you for, Michael, over the years is when 10 plus years ago, when I feel like a lot of the agency owner types that we were all hanging out and talking about the business. All of us were indies back then, and I think a lot of us were kind of like falling all over ourselves to try and figure out how to get acquired or whatever. And then I think those of us that did, we thought that was what success looked like. I certainly thought that's what success looked like. I can think of another handful of other friends of ours that I think they thought that's what success looked like.
Yeah.
And, yeah, sure, there's some money attached to it, but then you lose this thing you've created. No matter how much they tell you your culture won't be assimilated and won't disappear, it goes away. Frequently, for a lot of company owners, entrepreneurs, I know their company isn't just this business they made. It's their happy place. It's their perfect thing that they have made.
Yep.
It's their home. They made their job perfect so that they love going to work every day. I certainly know I felt that way about iChameleon back in the day, and I know you feel that way about the spaceship, and you were not keen on selling, and to the point and I'm sure you've had countless offers over the years. It's just not a path that is you've gone down. And again, we I don't know obviously all the details there, and I don't want to put you on the spot to share anything you don't feel comfortable sharing, but I would love to talk about or understand. I feel like that means you measure success in a different way, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And I would love to understand how you measure your own success and in context of that kind of stuff, if you're comfortable sharing it.
Sure, of course. And I'm largely speaking, I'm an open book. It's I mean, in regards to not selling the business, I would say the way that you painted it, though accurate, it was not that sort of clean. It's not, there's a lot of learning along the way, and I certainly went down the path of selling, in the sense that I knew I needed to educate myself in the process, because that's part of the job, is knowing what your options are and how you can take the next best step forward for your business in whatever sort of economic or cultural context you're in. So I started taking lots of first meetings, and then I got really good at first meetings, and then I went to second meetings, and I knew I got the pattern down. I knew what to say, but there were times where you're like, I've gone into this just to educate myself, but then as you get deeper into the meetings, you kind of get caught up, and so I had to learn intentionality about it. And I
Mm.
was lucky also, like I've spoken to dozens of friends and colleagues in the industry who have sold, and I had the benefit of their retrospect.
Mm.
And I can't sort of undersell the value of hearing the real story, not just the week after the announcement when everybody's getting congratulations emails, but 2 years, 3 years, 5 years later. Um, and so I guess it does reflect maybe some difference in measurement, but a lot of this is also kind of post-rationalized. Like, you're just making your way through the best you can. One thing I like to say when I visit business schools to speak is that the way it's taught, it seems like you have all of this time to like set up your strategy and like get everything, but 90+% of business is done in near real time. Like,
Yeah, I
there's
agree with
just
that.
too many factors going on all the time. So, you have to be honest about it. But yeah, I mean, the advantage of selling your business is you can make a lot of money if you do it at the right time in the right way. Um, the I guess for me, and probably comes from very much from my father, who was a college professor, and he did very well as a college professor, but he wasn't on the you know science or sports side. He was an English professor, fiction writing. His opinion, which he had no problem instilling into me at all, was, money's a tool like anything else. It's there to be spent. It's rough if you don't have it. And that was it. It was never. I never grew up with it as a measure of success in any way. Certainly as an acknowledgement of its necessity, and it's a privilege to even be able to say what I just said. But I think the what he always said to me is, find something you love to do, like I did. My dad was he loved reading and he loved writing, and he was insanely brilliant at both. And he built a very wonderful long career out of that. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day, another agency owner, that people didn't start their companies in many cases, certainly the era we're talking about, it to sell the business, but then it becomes somehow the only legacy you can leave, right? It's
Yeah.
the only one that gets valued, because it's the only one that's sort of measurable by a numeric value. I mean, I can measure success by years in business, and that's pretty cool. 21 years is no small thing. But, I think I do measure the success really differently, because it's what I was talking about before, that it's not just that the company's been around for 21 years, it's that there are some really beautiful threads of consistency all the way through those years. There's tons of change too, tons. But I think it's about measuring what's really important. And I do love to go to work every day still. And if I didn't, I probably would have done something else. But it's a pretty wonderful place.
What I was thinking about this in anticipation of today's show, and it's been on my mind lately about how I kind of measure my own success, and I realized that one thing I've realized, even from if I can look at my father, it's like it doesn't matter how big your business gets, with time everything kind of fades, frankly, um, and and um, and I think I would be very satisfied if one day, hopefully no time soon, if I was to pass away, a lot of people could stand up and say, Freddie Laker helped me start my career. Or like if I
Mhm.
had helped a lot of people, like, find their passion in work, or because look, I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm not, that's not how I've contributed to the world, but I feel like that's an impact that I could do, that it makes me feel really good. And if I knew that I kind of influenced a whole bunch of people's lives, like that would be a legacy that makes me really happy. Um, So I've got one more question for you on this front, and then I want to address these questions that have come up in chat.
Great.
Um, so when we talk about not selling and not building a company to sell, and this is a subjective question, but I'd love your reaction to it. Do you feel like when you build a business not to sell it, so you basically say, "Look, I'm never going to sell my business. It's not what I'm doing." You build it to be your forever home. Do you feel like it ends up being more valuable than the people that build it to sell it?
Maybe. I mean, it depends what value is, you know. It's certainly more valuable
Yeah,
to you if you're
yeah,
accomplishing a
fair
goal.
enough.
I was so naive when I started Big Spaceship. I mean, it was really only my second agency job.
Yeah.
I had an internship. I had 3 years at a digital agency in the late '90s, and or what's it called now? The late 20th century, I believe, is what young people are calling it now. Um, and then I started Big Spaceship in 2000, and so I was incredibly naive. I didn't build it to sell or not to sell. I built it based on what I'd seen thus far that seemed really cool, and a whole bunch of things that I'd seen thus far that I didn't think were very good ways to run a business and the right focus. And then the rest was filled in by, like, the old fall on your face 10,000 times and pick yourself back up and figure it out and refine and refine and refine. And
Oh
um,
shit.
yeah, so many oh shit moments. Uh, and so the I agree with you. I think that success is making some kind of positive impact on people. And I'm every time I talk to a spaceship alum who's doing great out in the world, I find that really gratifying. When I hear
They called spacemen or space shippers. What do you call
we
your
just call them
people?
crew.
Crew. I like that. That's cool.
Although I heard that there was a Slack
Spacemen.
channel called Pastronauts that was all spaceship alum.
That's awesome.
I thought that was pretty
Astronaut.
cool.
That's really
Um,
good.
but yeah, it's just it's a place that I think a lot of people think about as a place that made a real difference for them in their careers. But also, we've had companies started by people from Big Ship, alumni from Big Spaceship. We've had marriages, lifelong ships. Like, there's just a lot of. It's not just about the work,
Yeah.
It's about meeting great people and spending time with them and being changed by them, and hopefully them being changed in some positive way by you. And I think that is a great measure of success.
That's great. Look, I'm going to look like I'm reading here because I'm looking at some of the comments in the chat section. I want to make sure before we run out of time today. Again, love when the audience engages. So very happy to answer some of these questions. We're going to go back. Kate Gaeta said, "I have a question. How do you prioritize success metrics between client and internal goals?"
I mean, hopefully, if you do it right, you don't need to prioritize them because they are kind of intrinsic to one another. That you don't set an internal goal that's going to conflict with what you're trying to do for your client, because obviously that's the reason. They are the patron of that particular effort within the company, and our job is to walk into other companies and help them in some way. So you have to look at what you're doing really clearly and say, what can we layer into this that's complementary, that we want as a team. And it's the key is it's not a I'm not sitting there as the CEO saying this is the internal goal for this project, because that's where you get that kind of friction between the two. It's about the team working on it, saying here we are to do this, but we don't just exist as automatons here to do this particular service for these clients. We still have selves. And what do we do for ourselves in doing this? What do we learn? It may be an individual goal. I like when the team has a goal as well, but it always has to be in parallel with what we're doing for our client. And if it's not, there's a fundamental flaw in either how it was set up, or maybe we shouldn't have taken on that client in the first place. If you get into friction between those internal and external goals, it means somebody who doesn't understand very well, is it too far a degree of remove, is imposing something, or the team and the client actually shouldn't be working together.
Great advice. I'm going to simplify down the follow-up question. So, basically, what Masa Yoshi was asking is, in a nutshell, what do you think the next big kind of technological revolution is going to be? You know, is it if in terms of the digital world, is it biotechnology, is it VR? Is there anything that when you kind of daydream, you were rode right at the forefront of the one of the waves that kind of transformed the world in the last 20 years? If it was 2000 all over again, and you could be in any industry, because you thought that was going to be the next big wave, what do you suspect it would be?
Oh, I'm not
Or
so.
and it could be the one that you probably maybe even the most excited to be involved in. You may
Yeah,
not
I
be
mean, I think there's
searching.
a bunch of different answers to that. I'm not a very good futurist this way. I think biotechnology is obviously everything about our understanding of ourselves and our world is changing really rapidly. I think the way that we treat people in terms of health and wellness is probably going to be radically different 10 years from now, based on what I've learned about the change, which is, the millimeter deep. I think it coincides with and is complementary to the rise of AI and machine learning, and where that can be deployed to at least refine a lot of things that were maybe a bit more kind of blunt force in the past. My favorite one was a computer vision one. It's basically, I don't know if it's a tractor or an attachment to a tractor, but for large scale farming, when you are driving around to spray pesticides, which are obviously very harmful, and you don't want them to leach into the ground soil, the only way to do it before was just to spray everything. But now they have computer vision, and they just see a weed and detect it, or a pest-ridden thing, and they only deploy the spray in a very targeted way, more like an inkjet printer does. Um, those kinds of things are probably not going to ever be in the public's consciousness as a radical change, but they are in fact radical. I think the stuff that I'm interested in, I'm interested in this shift in software that's going on, that it links up with the whole thing around, it used to be that you had to adapt to the software. The software was a empirical tool and you had to learn it. And now there's more and more sort of software that starts to bend more to you, and you can kind of work it in different ways. So you start getting sort of building blocks. And I think the generation that's grown up on Minecraft and Roblox and things like that are going to want software that they can create themselves. And that's more and more happening now. And I think it's going to unleash a tremendous amount of creativity, because we're no longer blocked by kind of the rigidity of a particular experience.
Agreed. My 2 cents on this, for what it's worth, because I find this subject fascinating. What was interesting about the last kind of big revolution was it was effectively the internet was a foundation for sharing information at a global scale. That backbone, I don't think is going anywhere. What's happening is the amount of information, the types of information, the quality of the information, which could also be translated as content for what it's worth. So depending on how you're looking at it, and the ways that we interact with that content is changing massively. So You could argue that the data comes in through automated cars, and automatic driving, things like that is built on this. You could argue that VR and those kind of experiences will be built on this. You could argue that even like the computer vision, drone type, agritech stuff is all built on this. And so I think the champions of tomorrow, maybe how like Michael and I were building sites and these kind of next generation experiences for communication and experiences that allow people to interact with brands or information or businesses or do functional things on the web. Imagining what that may look like when you're like, hey, I'm doing that so I can build an interface to interact through a virtual experience or through a robotic experience where you're controlling a drone or a robotic arm 10,000 miles away, or interacting with maybe something that sits at the intersection between technology and human biology. So I just think it's going to be all about where these crossovers happen, and I think the masters of tomorrow will understand at a level of just like artists, it's just natural and fluid and completely native to them, understand how to interact with that, whether that's through code, whether that's through creative visualizations, or frankly even creating, like Michael described earlier, the platforms that allow people to do this without any of those kind of people. And if we're in the early days of things like Neuralink, Elon Musk kind of communicating with your brain into a computer interface, the way that we interact in the future may not even involve typing. It could be just thought based. And if you could start getting creative tools where people literally are just creating what they want through their imagination, you know, where does it go from there? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think the next big leap will be that profound. But it's going to be hard to predict. And I think my gut tells me it won't necessarily, the greatest people there probably won't be because they said, hey, I'm going to go protect that industry. They're probably going to be there because they loved it,
Yeah,
just like we did when the time came. It was just a hobby for us, and we were very, very, very lucky to be at the right place at the right time. And I suspect some other lucky bastard will be there when that time comes.
that's
Um,
right.
as a great question from the audience, good, nice,
Yeah,
inspirational
thank
ending to
you.
the episode. Michael, I just want to thank you for coming on our ship. It's so good to see your face. Looking forward to a big, long, lingering, awkward hug when I see you in person sometime this year. And again, congrats on all your success. You were a really wonderful guest there, and I'm sure everyone loved hearing about your background.
Well, thank you, Freddie. It's great to see you as always, and it was a treat. And thank you for the questions. It was so nice.
And so just a final thought for audience. Thank you so much for watching our ship. If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to support our content, the best thing you can do is give us a like, share us on your feeds, subscribe is our favorite thing for you to do. This is not something we do for money. It's not something we're trying to monetize. We love bringing together smart people and trying to get some great insights that we can share with you, whether those are inspirational, educational, or frankly having a good laugh about some of their best O-Ship moments. And with that, thank you so much for watching another week of O-Ship.